Hi, James here from Your Ability. In this video, I want to show you my favorite built-in settings on the iPad that make it work for all students and empower those students with learning challenges. Come on, let's jump in and have a look. So let's go ahead and let's just click on settings. So let's come down here and let's find settings. Okay, so let's click settings and let's pop up here towards the top. It's kind of midway down. You're looking for this icon that says accessibility. So we're going to click into accessibility and then you'll see a whole array of options available here. So they pretty much bring these under various different categories, okay? And it's very high level categories. So it's vision, it's physical and motor, it's hearing, and then it's general. And these are ones dependent again on the need of the student or child. You might use them intertwined, or it might be just one particular section that's of focus. For me, I'm just going to give a quick overview of some of them and then maybe dig into one or two a little bit more. For example, like spoken content, where we can have stuff read back, or students can easily have content read back to them, and just show you some of the built-in settings that are there already that we can easily dig into. So let's go back towards the top. So the ones that I'm not going to get into awful detail on is this one at the very top here called voiceover. For this is really specific to students that would have sensory disability, that would be visually impaired. VoiceOver will read back the content, and pretty much it's if the student was fully blind or visually impaired, it would read from top left to bottom right. So it's just a voiceover that's going to jump in, and I wouldn't recommend, if that's not something you need, then I wouldn't recommend even testing it or turning it on or even trying it. So let's not look at that right now. Zoom is very, very similar, more so for people that have visual impairment, again once more, but it just enables a much better level of zoom. Obviously we can pinch and zoom in with our fingers, but this is just another variation, another level of zoom. In terms of display and text size, sometimes this can be really useful for younger students, and it's not so much around vision, but it's just more around executive functioning and being able to engage with the iPad a little bit easier. So if it's younger students that you're working with, or younger kids, then I possibly would jump in here. For some of them, they might just engage with the words if they're bolded. So it's just small changes you'll see. So we can increase the size of the fonts on the left hand side there. And again, this is much more aimed at visual impairment. However, I think this works really well for some students that are younger, especially in that early stage primary or dependent on the disability. I often will find that this works better, or for somebody who's aging. So depending on who you're working with. So let's turn that off and let's go back. Button shapes sometimes can be helpful. So again, just to enable that. So now buttons basically will have a more of a shape and an underline, just small tweaks here and small changes. Transparency is always good. Contrast is very, very standard. That's something that they kind of build in already. Differentiate without color, that would mainly be for someone who has color blindness. We can do inversion. We can put on color filters. Again, this might not be only for students with visual impairment, but it does work for certain students with dyslexia, dependent on their personal preference. And let's just have a look at it. So we can actually turn on color filters. So we can go grayscale, we can go red, yellow, or you can pick your own look and feel in terms of the color structure that works for you. So again, this is something around color blindness, but I've seen this to work with general students as well in terms of learning difficulties. Reduced white point, that's a kind of a specific enough criteria, but these are just all small things that can work really well for some students, and it's very dependent on the student. I think that's the important part here. So let's look at one or two more ones that I think that are very important, and I'll come back to what's called spoken content, because that for me is probably one of the more important ones here, and we'll dig into that a little bit deeper in another video. As I come down here to physical and motor, we have touch. So if I just click on touch once, so we have assistive touch. Now you see this little thing that's moving around the screen here? That's actually assistive touch. And that is very, very useful. It's a quick way to get to certain features and functions within the iPad without having to go into settings. So if I tap on this thing actually once, you'll see here that it gives me one tap, and it's just an easy way for someone with a physical disability to be able to engage on an easier level with the iPad. I use it personally just so that you can actually see where my finger is going. So if you're a teacher, then it serves multiple purposes, or an SNA. Let's just move down here in terms of touch accommodation. So again, lots of things that we can change here in terms of sensitivity. This can work for students with physical disability or students that have DCD maybe, fine and gross motor skills might be an issue. So again, dependent on the student and depend on what they need, then we could change quite a lot here in terms of how we touch it and how we engage with it. Tap to wake is another one. It depends if the fine motor skill issues are a challenge, or if it's really younger students, we could change some of the bits and pieces here. Let's go back. Switch control, very much aimed and focused at students that would have a physical disability, potentially cerebral palsy, or that might be non-verbal, for example, or don't have the capacity to engage with the device on a physical level. So it's phenomenal what's available now out of the box with iPad devices, that we can actually set up eye gaze technology where you can control the whole thing with your eyes. But again, I'm not going to get into that, but you could also use switches. So if it was students with intellectual disability or a variation of physical disability, we could have touch switches. So they would tap a switch and it would do something, it would scan the page. But I won't get into the depths of that because that is a very specific piece. Let's just move down here some of it. And then keyboards is another one. This may well become something that's important in terms of some students with learning difficulties. So have a look at this. There's certain things that you can turn on and off in here in terms of keyboards. That is always good to know. Hearing is quite specific as well, so I won't go into that. The one thing that you might want to use, regardless of the students or the age, is guided access. And guided access, I'll dig into it in a bit more depth in another video. But basically, guided access will control and set a time on how long a student can stay within a certain app. So again, it's really, really useful. So the one that we are most concerned with, I suppose, is what's called spoken content. I'm just going to click on it once, jump in here. I'll go into this in a bit more detail on a later video, but just to bear in mind, we literally have a full text-to-speech application that's built into the iPad. So what do I mean when I say text-to-speech? We can select text and have it read back in a multitude of voices, at certain tones, at a certain speed. It can highlight it in different colors, and just so the visual, the audio experience for a student is really, really customizable, I would say, is the core word here. And this is stuff that we would have paid lots of money for previously in the last few years, but now the level of customization that's actually built into accessibility within the iPad is really beyond what we would have paid lots of money for. So I'm going to dig into some of those a little bit later, but the core ones here, it's settings, accessibility. Just have a look around there and see what's available. Mess around with it a small bit yourself and really try to see what could work for your student or for your son or daughter.